From the Holy Gospel according to Luke. As Jesus continued on toward Jerusalem, he reached the border between Galilee and Samaria. As he entered a village there, 10 lepers stood at a distance crying out, "Jesus, Master, have mercy on us." He looked at them and said, "Go, show yourselves to the priests." And as they went, they were cleansed of their leprosy. One of them, when he saw that he was healed, came back to Jesus shouting, "Praise God." He fell to the ground at Jesus' feet, thanking him for what he had done. This man was a Samaritan. Jesus asked, "Didn't I heal 10 men? Where are the other 9? Has no one returned to give glory except this foreigner?" And Jesus said to the man, "Stand up and go. Your faith has healed you." My brothers and sisters, the Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Ever since I started to read when I was young, I've always been fascinated by dictionaries. And I remember when I started to read Filipino comics, it took me a while how to read some words. And like in the comics, if somebody is falling, there is a word there, or eh. But I would read each letter, and then H. Then I look at this dictionary, what does this mean? And then later I recognize it's ooh, not O, H. But anyway, my mother had this Tagalog or Filipino, English, Filipino dictionary, and I loved reading it. And until now, when this email, it says word genius, somehow found its way into my inbox. I don't know how, but it gives you like new words, unfamiliar words to help you increase your dictionary or your vocabulary. I did not delete it or I did not unsubscribe because it's interesting. So reading the gospel, I was reflecting about this leper who came back, a Samaritan. And then yesterday, I got this word from that word genius site. And it says the word is penumbra. Penumbra is like, if I put my hand against the light, I can, or something black, like in a lunar eclipse, you see this shiny edge, and that's the penumbra. But anyway, when I look at the story of the 10 lepers, indeed, it's a lesson about gratitude. But just a story or a lesson about gratitude. It actually deals with the very primal considerations or very essential things about our faith and how we build our community. First, it's not only about gratitude. It's a given lesson, easy to understand. But we, as we preach, it is also our duty not to only to reflect for ourselves, but also to reflect with the community. Because as we stand here, we are spiritual leaders. And so we try our best to reflect with the community. And so when we look at this story, a beautiful story of these 10 lepers, healed, and then only one came back, the first thing that we can learn is the realization of who we are. Simply called self-knowledge. Now, in the spiritual journey, as taught by the spiritual masters, by the saints, scholars, self-knowledge in the spiritual realm is always together or directly proportional to knowing about who our God is. So the more we know about ourselves should also lead us about knowing more about who our God is. And in this story, in the first reading, Naaman realized there's only one God. There's a movement from polytheism to monotheism. There's only one God, the God of Israel. And in the second reading, it's been established. Jesus Christ, the eternal message, the only Son of God. We are lepers in one way or another. That's part of knowing something about ourselves. But lepers as we are, we get healed in different ways. We get these different circumstances where we have a disease, spiritual, moral, even physical. But every time we get healed, every time we are drawn closer to God, we recognize our humanity, that we are limited. We can be inflicted. We are weak. We are broken. But at the same time, we begin to know that God is always there to heal us and to save us. So, God, who is pure grace, is like at the back is the light of the penumbra, where we see the shadow, the black thing, like in a lunar or solar eclipse, that we see our imperfection. We see our inadequacies or limitedness. But at the same time, the light is always there and telling us, you will be healed, you are loved, and you will be okay. The second penumbrate message, so to say, is that when we are healed, we recognize more and more our misery, and we need the saving grace of God. And that makes us humble. It brings us to humility. Because humility, as St. Teresa of Avila would always insist, is walking in truth. And what is the truth about each one of us? We are all broken. We are all imperfect. We are all struggling. And we have to be humble to recognize this and recognize that God completes us or God heals us. to walk in truth or to be humble is very difficult. But actually, it's one of the basic qualities of a Christian in order to grow in faith or in these virtues. We call them theological virtues. The Europeans call it theological virtues, whatever. The virtues, faith, hope, and love. But one of the basic requirements to grow in faith, hope, and love is to be humble. And the leper who came back is an image of each one of us that in the face of being saved, in the reality of being rescued or being healed, our first attitude should be humility. And then we can say, thank you for healing me. Thank you for being there. Another beautiful message of this 10 lepers is that it brings us to the essential of how it is to build a community. I don't know if I ever read any commentary about the parable of the 10 lepers sayings, but somehow, and adapting it to our community here in St. Matthew, I find it very inspiring to say that this parable reminds us or puts us in confrontation with the essentials of what it is to build a community. The gospel says the Samaritan is a foreigner. It's like, oh, Jesus healed 10 lepers and one came back. And the Samaritan says, what? Samaritan? Unbelievable. Because nobody will expect a Samaritan to do that. But that's exactly the point of the parable. The brokenness, the imperfection is universal. But at the same time, the capacity to be humble, to be grateful, to come back to the Lord is universal. And Jesus is sending that message strong. There is no Samaritan, Jew, or whoever, or whatever. When I love somebody, I see the value, the dignity of that person, no matter what. And that is the kind of loving that we should learn. The kind of healing or approaching or encountering another person that we should have all. A disposition that we should all have. Theologians call it theological vision of the other. I think I mentioned this before. Where when you meet a person, you see that this person is not only human. This person is divine. God is with him. And then I begin to regard this person divine as human, as he is. And as I have always emphasized, every one of us is actually more divine than human, because we are created in the image of likeness of God. So even if this is a Samaritan, nobody believes he will be repentant and grateful, but still the grace of what is divine in him worked, and then he came back. That is the same invitation for each one of us. And so when we begin to build, or if we want to build a community, then we should have this theological vision of the other, where we see that the other is not only a girl, a boy, a woman, a man with this preference and with this education, but basically a person who is human and divine at the same time, sharing equal dignity with everyone else. And so when we come to this realization of what we are essentially before God, then we also come to know what we are not. And so, that theological vision, or looking at every person, accepting every person with that kind of regard or consideration, here in St. Matthew, we have a way of articulating all are welcome. So when we say all are welcome, that should be our disposition. That should be our attitude. And that should be the essential elements that we should be, or we must be promoting all the time. And we'll be successful. Somehow. And because this church has been grown. So, what we are not is that when we say that this community should prioritize money in order to survive, that's not essential. When we say that this community or this ECC church should regard women lesser than men in any regard, then that is not essential. When we say that organization or paperwork or what needs to be put first in order for this church to grow and thrive, that is not essential. What is essential, always, is to be spiritual and pastoral. What does it mean? Spiritual means always check the quality of our relationship with one another. Spirituality is nothing else than the quality of our relationship with one another. That parable of the 10 lepers shows us how Jesus makes sure that we understand, no matter what, a leper, a broken, a repentant, even one, still, he was forgiving, he was healing. No categories. Everybody deserves this attention, forgiveness, and healing. My dear brothers and sisters, these parables are meant to inspire us. But like in the situation where we see a penumbra, there's always this light around this dark image. And the dark image is, we can figure out what the image is because of even of a faint light behind it. And many times that could happen to any community, or to any family, or to any setup in a school, in a workplace. But still, the essentials don't change. And the good news always is that each one of us has the capacity to live that essential. We are blessed, originally blessed. It's inherent to us to recognize, and we are capable always to recognize that as miserable as we are, God is always there to help us and to heal us. That we are always capable to be humble and to walk in truth. And as a community, we are always capable of considering, looking at one another as divine, as human and divine at the same time. We ask for this grace, my dear brothers and sisters, that like the lepers in the gospel, wounded, diseased, or outcast, considered worthless in the society, we can look at ourselves in that way. Sometimes, maybe we are worthless, or maybe we feel other people are considering us like that. But again, the essential thing is that God's love and our capacity to love a leper, an outcast, an undesirable person is always a possibility. Actually, the possibility is unlimited. Unlimited. Only if we believe in that grace and we try our best to practice the virtue. To be humble, to be loving. Because if we only love those who are lovable and beautiful, then that's it. That's only natural. Everybody does what is beautiful, what is good looking, what is, what makes us feel good, what flatters us. But this is not, the essential things are not only about being natural. They're also about an invitation to do and to recognize the supernatural. Means we need grace to do it. But grace is always there. And so we pray, my dear brothers and sisters, as I said, as leper as we are, may we always have the grace to be like Jesus Christ, to love one another, and always to live, recognize the essentials that gather us together, that make this community strong, and so that we can really worship, give thanks in the Eucharist, as the Eucharist essentially means, and gather together as one community. May we always live in this blessing. God bless us.
Amen.
Amen.